know about UX recruitment and were too afraid to ask. So, listen up very carefully. Here we have Kaler. Big round of applause, everyone.
Wow, this is what 572 people look like. Welcome to my talk. I'm going to tell you 40 things about user experience recruitment that you were too afraid to ask. And the numbers go down as well, so as somebody mentioned earlier, you can see when I'm about to finish. So I'm going to kick off and just tell you a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, my day job is that I run a recruitment business called Futureheads Recruitment in London. It's been running for about 5 years, and we recruit in digital. Of course, user experience is a part of that. I also am founder of a conference called UCD, standing for User-Centered Design, and that's in its third year now. But actually, I've spent 15 years recruiting for user experience. That's pretty much all I've done my grown-up life. I've run about 3,000 interviews, and I've taken more jobs, specifically in user experience. So I'm going to share with you some of my experiences today. So how has user experience changed for me in the last 15 years? Well, people no longer think I'm making it up. There's much more of an understanding about user experience inside and outside the industry. People no longer use words like whether something is usable to measure whether it's successful. So we've seen lots of change. The question I'm sure you all want to know is your employer underpaying you? Well, the first thing really for me is don't judge your job by how much you get paid. And also, what are you comparing yourself to? Different industries tend to pay different levels of money, and also different companies have different pay structures. And finally, don't ask your colleagues what they earn. No conversation ever ends well when it starts with, what do you get paid? What are the big hiring trends? In my experience, there are no trends. It's mental out there. There have always been more jobs than there are people, and there are never, ever enough good people. But there are big growth areas. The big growth area I've seen this year have been finance, retail, and publishing particularly. So we used to have a couple of clients in those areas, and now we're seeing businesses grow big teams, and so they're definitely ones to watch. Who gets paid the most? Financial services pays a lot of money. Consultancies are increasingly have deep pockets and big digital transformation remits. Corporates in general are paying a lot of money at the moment, but that's really to catch up and build out big teams. And contractors always, for sure, particularly if you have the ability to work on complexity in your product. What skills are most desired? We'd heard a little bit about storytelling and visual design today. If you are able to go into your client or your stakeholder and really tell a story and help engage with some visual design, those are really sought after skills. Communication and diplomacy when you're talking with your stakeholders or internal teams. And then much more awareness around commercial and business skills this year I've seen, particularly if you have those within an industry specialism. There are so many courses out there for user experience. I couldn't possibly list them all, but I wanted to just kind of give you some of the highlights that I've seen. So creative, technology, psychology, there's been more of an attraction around engineering and product courses this year. But I've also seen lots of business degrees come into play, people that have come in from an economics degree or something like that and really be effective in a user experience role. There are lots of good conferences to learn about user experience. IXDA and UXPA's events are free if you're a member, so I would definitely consider that. There's UX London, which runs for 3 days, which is expensive, but you can kind of see the international superstars of user experience and has thousands of people going. UCD, the conference that I run, has been affectionately called the Goldilocks of conferences, not too big, not too small. And then today we've seen our own superstars at NUX, and I'm having a great time, so definitely one of those. And then finally for me is South by Southwest. It's run in Austin. It is expensive, but it really makes me sit up and think and helps me really look at broader digital themes. Lots of good books in UX. Again, Amazon is flooded. I read a lot about UX, Smashing UX, Lean, and Don't Make Me Think. I think are great introductions, and anybody who joins Futureheads, it lands on their desk pretty quickly for them to read. My favourite coffee table books, Information is Beautiful, Knowledge is Beautiful, and then I'm a huge fan of Giles Colburn's Simple and Usable. I think this is the bit where you shoot me for only having London statistics, so I apologise for you in advance. But the average contractor in London at the moment earns £400 a day. I've had people on my books that earn up to £800 a day, and I know that there are people out there that earn even more than that. But an interesting statistic for you is just 10 years ago, the average day rate for a contractor in user experience was just £180 a day. So we've seen it go up 100% in less than 10 years. What does 2015 look like? Well, that's a huge question. We've seen 40% growth year on year to date, really. What I've seen is our client base really shift from 90% agency to about 60% this year, and that's in the last 3 years. So I think we're going to continue to see a real shift towards clients looking to build out their own digital and user experience teams. Projects that I'm seeing more and more of are mobile payments, where physical meets interface design. And you know, I'm starting to see people ask the question, can one person really be responsible for a whole experience for a business? Can it even be a whole team? And I think 2015 will really start to shake that down a little bit for us. Is a portfolio necessary? I know Ian Fenn's writing a book about this. So I've never had anybody say, please don't send it to me. No HR person, no line manager, no hiring manager ever asks me not to send it to them. What I have seen is a shift from it being a demonstration of your technical skills. So it's no longer populated with endless wireframes and user journeys. It's much more about telling a story. How do you present your work? And what's changed during a project? So increasingly, I'm seeing people have kind of before and after slides in their portfolio, where they're actually looking to show what they're actually demonstrating what changed on a product and service as a result of the work that they did. So I'm going to talk to you about why clients go for a permanent hire and why they go for a contract hire. I'm going to go through permanent first. So often for permanent, it's simply growth. We're in a massive growth phase at the moment, but there are other reasons that people recruit permanent members of staff as well. Retention's at an all-time low in digital, and often it's a backfill. But also businesses like to hire permanent people to lead key client engagements. So if you want to manage a client engagement a permanent hire is often much more preferable. But also sometimes you're going into a business where they don't really understand the language of user experience and design. So a permanent person's role is actually about evangelism, about going into other departments and talking through what you're looking to achieve and how you're going to do that and getting them on board. People hire contractors for all sorts of things. Often there's just not enough resource on a project. Often it's just that you haven't got the right resource. You might be hiring people for a particular discrete project. You're looking to hit a deadline. Unfortunately, sometimes people hire contractors to get over the kind of boring grunt work so they can hit a deadline, and they can keep their permanent members of staff engaged. Sometimes businesses still think that they don't need a full-time hire to lead their experience or their user experience in any way. And sometimes that they're working on a pitch and they really want a particular skill set to do that. So for candidates, I'm going to talk to you about why they want permanent roles and also why they want contracts, perm first. So often people are looking for permanent roles because they want a bit of stability. Maybe they're saving for a mortgage, they're about to have a young family, they've got a baby on the way, often see them move back into a permanent role. Sometimes it's to grow your softer skills. You know, you're unlikely to get management skills or management training while you're contracting. So a permanent role is where you can really develop those softer skills. It could be your first or second role, and you're really looking to find out what it feels like to work in a business. Or sometimes you're just looking to lead longer engagements. You want to work with clients for longer, and you really want to see the consequences of your work and some of that return on investment. Often people want contract because of the money. The money is undeniably good in user experience to contract, but that isn't the only reason. People also want to contract because they want variety. They rapidly want to build up their portfolio with different examples of work. Perhaps it's a lifestyle choice. I have several contractors on my books at the moment that disappear in December and January to more exotic climates and then come back to work in February. And often it's just because they want some more independence and some flexibility, and that's a really good time for them to contract. So who's hiring juniors out there? Not enough people in my mind. I would love to see some more junior hires. Every year I see the same challenge with graduates looking to get their first job. But there are people that are more up for it than there used to be. So big consultancies have got big graduate recruitment projects this year, and I think that's going to really start to stabilise the market in a couple of years as those skills come up. Clients direct often have more of a capacity to train graduates, so I'm seeing some more graduates going to clients direct every year. Agencies tend to rely on a more billable resource much more quickly, and sometimes I see some reticence from them, but I do see a change there because there's such a skill shortage. So from this slide, I'm assuming that you're all at some point in the next 5 years going to be looking to choose maybe a new job. And for me, what I think you should do is kind of just be honest with yourself about what you're looking for and what's really important for you. It's really easy to get seduced during a recruitment phase, while you're going through a recruitment phase. So I often make a list of things that are really important to me, and that's culture, money. Who's my line manager going to be? What products am I going to get to work on? What's my portfolio going to look like? Where's the location? Does that work for me? Really simple things like that, and then I would grade them. So I think it's good to do to kind of trust your gut, but also go do some due diligence around that as well. Now, I'm assuming that you're all going through a phase where you're going to have multiple offers, and I think the market at some point is going to afford that for every single one of you in here. So when you are letting people down, I guess the key thing is to do it gently, because we know that we're a very close-knit community. You're likely to bump into people either as your next line manager, your next colleague, or maybe even your client. So, offering closure is really important, and giving them quite clear feedback about why you don't want to work there, perhaps some feedback on how you found the interviewing process, so that they can roll that into their recruitment process moving forward and make sure that they get the right hire for them too. I have to write lots of job ads in my job, and they are very different from job specs. I think it's really important that you write a job ad, because I see a real different level of response from the different ones that we write. So it's about succinctly telling the marketplace what you're looking for. The best responses I get are the ones that, of course, pay the most, but not always. Actually, the ones that I see a lot of uptake on are the ones that are written in a really informal but professional tone, ones that can really convey what the process is, what your culture is, what your values are, and actually what that team or that business is really passionate about doing. And I think you'll see a really good result from your ads. People make mistakes during the recruitment process, and this is really about the mistakes that firms or businesses make. A key one being just going quiet. Maybe there's some internal changes, or you've made that hire, or that person wasn't right. Feeding back is key, and feeding back quickly. Sometimes I see businesses make a decision too early. You've met somebody for the first time, you think they're perfect. Maybe you've been going through this recruitment process for a while, so you offer them on the spot, and people tend to get nervous around that. But equally, the absolute opposite happens. Where you don't make a decision quick enough, and there's multiple layers of interviews, and people kind of lose momentum. I always recommend at least 2 interviews, first for your kind of chemistry meet, and then the second one where you go through the absolute sort of nitty-gritty deliverables around a role. Sometimes people forget to sell the business and forget to sell what sort of employer this person might be working for, and that's a key part of the recruitment process and what people are looking for next. Other times people just oversell the role, and that quickly unravels within a few months. So it's really important that you stay true to what's going to happen. And then a final one for me is, you can have a business and a candidate who both want to work on the same product and they're really excited about it. But do they share the same values about how they're going to do that? And it's important to flush that out at interview stage. Well, I've also seen candidates make lots of mistakes. And apart from the obvious, not making enough eye contact, talking too much, not talking enough, smelling of fags, booze, rock and roll. A real key thing is to prepare. And I'm going to tell you more about that because I think it's a really big thing. But the process can also come undone for lots of other reasons. People change expectations, and I've certainly seen that loads in the last 3 or 4 years where we've had somebody come in and they're very clear about what they want, what salary they're looking for, even down to what sort of clients they're looking to work for. And actually, they go into the recruitment process, they interview at 4 or 5 places, and they realize, oh my God, I'm really popular at the moment. I want a bit more money. But I think that's fine, but I think it's really important that you kind of feed that back to the employer or to your recruiter so that there aren't any surprises during that offer stage. So if your expectations change, let people know during, not after. The interviews vary an awful lot, actually, from business to business. I've kind of separated them out as agency and client side here, but it's not always exclusively like that. But there are some key themes that I have noted. So client to agencies, agencies share some experiences, but they also differ in some spaces. So agencies can be much pacier, and I think the reason for that is they've suffered competition for a lot longer for employees. Clients can often be slower to sign off, particularly if you want any changes to the role. And clients often have more interviews as well, and that can be a hangover of how different departments work in a business. Agencies focus an awful lot more on culture fit of a team, and clients focus on a culture fit for a business. So those are different things that you can kind of consider when you're preparing. So you're thinking of joining a startup, and by this startup, I'm really talking about a grassroots level. I'm not talking about a really well-funded startup that's a kind of plug-and-play business. You have to be really flexible if you want to join a startup. You're unlikely to have a HR person, an IT person, an office manager. So really demonstrating that you can roll your sleeves up and muck in is important. It's a great environment for innovation and idea generation. And your voice is often bigger because you're working with a smaller team. Working with a smaller team also means that you have a bigger impact on culture. So you need to be a really positive force, quite unflappable, and a nice person to be around. So perhaps you have a broad set of skills. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's really about how you articulate them at interview. So I think it's really important that you look at what your core skills are, get really comfortable about how you're going to demonstrate those core skills, and then look at your complementary skills and talk about how they impact that core set of skills. So perhaps you've got a background in photography, and that really impacts the way that visuals are used in user experience, and I've seen that in some people's portfolios. I think that's excellent. I've also seen some people that have come from an editorial background and been writers, and that copywriting is really, really useful in a user experience team. So it's just about the hierarchy of those. So user experience recruiters, they're all the same, right? I may be a little bit biased, actually, about this. I think it's important to get a specialist if you can. Who's in their network? The more people are in their network, the more people they can introduce you to. When you're engaging a recruiter, really what you're paying for is their Rolodex, is their little black book. If they're experienced, sometimes they can identify clients or candidates that perhaps don't have live roles or aren't quite ready to look yet, but they've got exactly the skills that you're looking for. So they can really kind of map that before the actual hire happens, before you've got sign-off. They can advise you on what salary to pay, what salary you need, how to present yourself. One of the biggest things I've learned from setting up Futureheads is that the bar to entry into recruitment is low and sometimes non-existent. So if you can get a referral, I would, because the chances are if they've done a good job for somebody else, they can do a good job for you. So what happens if you take a contract and it gets terminated unexpectedly? Unfortunately, that is contract, and it's a risk you take for having the flexibility and a little bit more money, I think. But you can have something written up which is about a spirit of an agreement. So you could request something written which isn't legal, which just says you'll give each other a week's notice or you'll give each other the month's notice. I think the important thing here is that you match it both sides. So you're really sharing that level of commitment. And if you do decide to become a contractor, how do you make sure that you stay abreast of what's going on out there? How do you upskill? Because it's unlikely that you'll have any training in your role. Well, I think networking is really key. We've talked about some of the places that you can network, and I noticed there's a lot of contractors there. But also, if you're contracting somewhere for a long time, if they have internal events or brown bag events, you're often very welcome to attend those, and I would if I was you. Keep reading. And I would also save a percentage of your earnings for personal investment, and so you can go and see some of those networking events and conferences that we've talked about earlier, and there are some more agile kind of day-long courses and businesses that will allow you to go to day-long courses now. So NDAs is a question that I get asked and really loads about, and I always start with, find exactly what you can and cannot show, because lots of people don't know until it's too late to ask. So when you're at the beginning of the contract, make sure you're really clear about what your NDAs are. Also, tell a story. You can use imagery which doesn't use your documentation. You might shrink something to us and debrand it. You might send your samples of work with a time cap that's password protected, and I'm increasingly seeing people do that via usendit.com, allows you to do it for free. It's also a brilliant way, actually, to get an interview, to get a face-to-face meeting if you're not able to send your work via email. Finally, if there's really nothing you can do and you've got a stack of NDA'd work and you can't show it to anybody, a way to get around that is by getting somebody to set you a task on site. And I've seen businesses where they'll set somebody a task, and it's not about you creating anything, but it's about talking about how you would solve a problem. And often that gets through that, having to show work. When is the best time in your career to start contracting? Well, I think it's when you've got some miles under your boots. And by that, for me, the best contractors I've seen have done 4 years across a mixture of agency and clients. You really have to be self-managing as a contractor. And there are some elements of your career that you're about to put on hold. You might have a project where you are doing that grunt work we talked about earlier. You won't get any management experience or management skills or management training, but also it's a time where there might be some instability, and can you really afford to have that downtime? It's a great time to build up your portfolio though, and I have had a candidate just recently who had 4 years, both agency and client side, but just working with one brand across different platforms, and contracting is a way for them to really kind of develop their portfolio and offer their future employees some diversity. Hopefully none of you do this. But asking for a pay rise mid-contract is the one that I always have to sort out. And it can be really tempting. You get offered something mid-contract and it's a little bit more money and you're thinking, I'm worth more in the marketplace. That's fine. Complete your contract before you ask for a pay rise. If you think an extension is on the horizon and you want more money, give your employer time to prepare for that. Give them time to digest it. Give them time to clear a new budget if they need to. The best contractors I know are the ones with the best reputation. And that reputation comes from completing work, really, and not leaving people in the shit. Also, people think they can cruise when they're contracting. And that goes back to reputation. You know, mirror the business that you are contracting in. Look at what people are wearing, what hours people are keeping. You know, things like that are going to really help you move on and get more bookings. If you want to be a contractor, your reputation really needs to be spotless. I'm seeing real lines blur between UX and design. And I'm this year seeing like genuine hybrids who are 50-50 both sides. And it's not always essential that you have design skills. You know, if you're going into a user research role, of course they're not essential, but I have seen design skills really help engagement, whether that's with clients or stakeholders. And also they help you understand how designers work. So yeah, there are more opportunities for UX people with design skills, but they're not essential. Creating a job spec is essential. I've seen so many businesses, you know, kind of dig up their job spec from the graves of the shared drive 3 years ago that maybe your ops manager or your HR manager wrote. It's got to be written by you, not the ops team or not a HR team, because it's got to be written with your tone and your passion. And nobody really else can convey that. So I'm going to talk about how you run an interview, so you're the interviewer, not the interviewee in this respect. I would advise you to kind of look at the key areas of the job spec that you're looking to fulfill and write half a dozen questions around each area. Now, I know interviews change from interview to interview, but what you will find if you do half a dozen interviews is that there's a real mismatch in the information that you've gathered. So giving yourself a little bit of structure will really help. I like questions like, tell me a little bit more about that. And that way you're really steering the candidate to tell you what they're passionate about. If something's really bugging you in an interview, you know, it's only going to get louder and more magnified once you've taken that person into employment. So your remit is really to uncover that now. I tend to scribble in margins and go back to it when I've formalised in my head the best way to ask that question. When I'm hiring for my team, I want to know a bit more about them, as well as their skills. I want to kind of find out about what they like outside work. So I often ask questions like, what's your life plan? You know, that often throws up a lot of information about people. I ask them what their best day in their professional life is, because you can find out an awful lot about what people are motivated by. And also I ask people, if they did have a lot of money, what would they do with it? And that often tells you what their drivers are. So you're being interviewed, and I said I was going to come back to preparation, and that really is the key for me when you're going to an interview. Look at Google, look at blogs, go onto LinkedIn, read in the news, write down 25 questions that you think you're going to get asked, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to get asked about them, and become really, really fluid in how you're going to respond to those questions. That does mean that if you get thrown any curveballs or any questions that you weren't expected, you've got a bit of time to think on your feet. And it also means that you can really concentrate on eye contact and flow of conversation. I've seen lots of people transfer into user experience from project management, technical, creative, all sorts of things. Just as an interest point, I've never ever seen anybody transfer out in 15 years. Yes. So what are your motivations for doing this? And if it's money, that's okay. But you really have to be willing to put some hard work in. I do see people come in and go, well, what do I need to learn? You know, the best people that come to me that want to transfer are already people that are engaged with the community. They've read a few books, they've signed up for some courses, and they've actually looked at the marketplace and seen what their transferable skills are and identified the ones that they need to develop. And be prepared to take a drop in salary. I have almost always seen that happen, and it hasn't been for a long time. Most of the time it's been for less than 12 months that you've taken a drop in salary, but you will need to do that to show willing. So before UX, well, people were still doing UX as I remember it. I used to recruit people from information management degrees, library trained graduates, design, technology, psychology, all the stuff that we see now. But what I did see was all of those people were just asking the why question. Why are we doing this? We've shaped some clear methods and processes around UX, but it does differ from business to business. So I still go into a business and ask them what user experience means to them, and almost always get a different answer. So I always urge you to do that. Oh, we're down to my final slide. Gutted about that. Are we in a UX bubble, and is it about to pop? Well, I don't really know the answer to that question. Now, what I do know is that it's much better understood in business. There's a hygiene factor now across across disciplines. Nobody ever says, that's not my area anymore. I've seen product and user experience come and work closer together. I also think the gap between creative, technology, product, and UX needs to move in a little bit closer still. And I know that a product or service will always need to have a good experience. I'm just not sure whether that will be one person or one team's responsibility. But we know that design and UX will continue to be important. Thank you.